I recently picked up some coffee that's really nice from a place that I like to get coffee from when I have the opportunity. The only issue is that it's a little bit out of the way from where I live. I used to live a lot closer, which was nice at the time, but now it's not too often that I have the chance to head over there. But I was in the general area anyway, and so I thought I would relish that opportunity to stop by the shop and pick up a little bit of coffee for myself, a little bit of a treat, I suppose, from my normal kind of coffee, which I would usually just get from the supermarket or the shop just around the corner from myself. And the coffee from these places aren't too bad, but this shop I go to is especially nice. It's run by just one gentleman who roasts all of his own beans, and I don't know, you just get this sense that a lot of care and passion goes into roasting these beans and curating the selection that you find there. And it's the kind of place where they're very happy to talk to you about what kind of coffee it is that you like to drink, and they're very knowledgeable about everything that they sell there. And so, well, it was a few years ago that I first went in, and so I had that conversation with the gentleman who runs it, and he suggested to me this roast called French partridge. And I don't know if this is sort of like a common blend, or if it's something that he has created himself, but ever since I tried French partridge, that is exactly the one I go for. I always come back to it because it has this sort of, it's not so strong that it's gonna sort of blow your face off, if you know what I mean. But it's strong enough, but it's mellow and it has flavor. I think a lot of coffee, and I'm sure people who don't drink coffee will sympathize with this, but I think that a lot of coffee can really just taste like mud, But this has some flavor, some fruity flavor that isn't too overpowering, And I find that it is the best to make a cup of in the morning. Hello, by the way. My name's Andrew. Thanks for joining me. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about coffee, which might seem like kind of a strange thing to talk about, to help you relax before bed. But honestly, I've always had this really calm, relaxing sort of association with coffee. And I think that's because often when I'm drinking coffee, it's in the early morning and during a moment at which in the day that I am simply pausing, simply reflecting, relaxing. The ritual that I have of drinking coffee, which I have had for many years now. I can't remember any stretch of time in the last 10 years, perhaps, that I have foregone my morning coffee. Occasionally, of course, you do have, the opportunity / the obligation to forego a coffee in the morning, but given the choice, it is a ritual that I enjoy greatly. And more so in recent years, not just the ritual of drinking it, which is nice in itself. I have spoken before in these conversations about tea, and for me, the ritual of brewing coffee is kind of similar to that. And there's many ways in which one can make coffee, and I myself have made it many ways over the years. I today will make it with something called an AeroPress, and that might be something you're familiar with if you're particularly into coffee. And I would presume that if you're listening to this now, it might be the case that you enjoy a cup of coffee. Or it might in fact just be the case that you don't mind hearing me talk about coffee. And I hope that's the case if you're not a fan of coffee, because, well, I'm quite passionate about it, I guess. I like it a lot. And like I say, I have this calming, sort of meditative association with coffee. So I can talk about it quite enthusiastically. But you might be familiar with an AeroPress if you have been into coffee for some time. You sort of hear about these things at the very least. A few years ago, it would have been the case that I had kind of just sort of heard of an AeroPress, but not really fully understood what it was, I guess. For those of you who have heard me talk about tea in the past, they'll know that I used to work in a tea shop. And tea was the thing that they primarily sold. They were famous for tea. But they also sold coffee. And I was much more interested in the coffee, I must say. And there, in that shop, they sold an AeroPress. But at the time, I wasn't really sure at all what it was. It's sort of a small device, and looks a little bit like a yay-high, sort of foot-long, maybe a little less than a foot-long, wide syringe, I suppose you could call it. And ultimately, it is just a cafetiere, really. A cafetiere for one person that has replaceable filters. And like I say, that's how I make my coffee today. And it is a very good way of making coffee. I have to say, I particularly like the coffee when it's made in an AeroPress. It is, I don't know, I think I might convince myself that in some way it's aerated by the process and therefore a little milder, a little bit more flavorful. I don't know how much of that is true, but it's what I imagine when I'm making it, and I feel like I can taste it, and that's all that matters to me, quite honestly. And in the past I have made coffee in a cafetiere as well. If you're not familiar with coffee, that's sort of the jug-like apparatus with a plunger on the top. Very similar to an AeroPress, really. And I've also used one of those sort of Italian kettle-style devices. Now, these most certainly do have a proper name, but I've actually forgotten the name of these devices. But you may have seen these as well, where you have this sort of metal, as I say, kettle that goes on the stovetop. And I think it best works on a gas flame, but you might be able to use it on an electric stovetop. I'm unsure. I always used to use it with a gas flame. And it's this sort of metallic kettle that has two sections to it. And the bottom section sort of unscrews from the top. And the top looks more like a stubby pouring kettle with the handle attached. And the bottom is kind of just like a little area where you would pour the water. And then in the center, between these two halves, is this kind of, it sort of looks like, I've forgotten the name for them now, it's a very simple object. Something you would use to pour liquid into something else. I'm forgetting my mind a little bit in this. I want to say filter, but it's not that. It is I'll continue to describe. It's just like a small metal ring, and so what happens is you would pour the water into the bottom section, and as you place this onto the stovetop, and you wouldn't do that quite yet, you'd pour the water into the area, the bottom container, and then on top of that, you would place this sort of little cup with a little spout coming down from the bottom. And you would put the coffee into this little cup. And then that sits just above the little container of water. And then you would screw the kettle-like piece back on top of it. And that has sort of like an empty container within it, of course. And then once all of it is back together again, you place it onto the hob. You set the flame going, and the water in the bottom begins to boil. And as it boils and it gets hotter and hotter, you would then see that the water begins to rise, begins to get forced through this sort of cup with the spout on the bottom. And the water is permeated through the coffee grounds that you've put into the cup. And then it all begins to bubble up into the second half of this device. And that is where you're getting this really rich, strong coffee beginning to bubble. And in just a few minutes, really, you will then get your strong coffee, your espresso. In fact, I believe these devices are specifically for producing espresso. And that is a really lovely way of making coffee. I used to enjoy it a lot, but the only thing is that I found it a little bit faffy to clean the device. That is the one pitfall of coffee making, is that I'm not a big fan of dispensing of coffee grounds. It's the texture of it, that sort of like wet, gritty sand. It's just slightly sort of annoying to get rid of, I think. Recently, I've been dispensing of my grounds into a little box because my partner uses them for the garden. Been collecting many used coffee grounds over the past few weeks. I don't know if you know this, but coffee grounds are supposedly quite a potent pesticide, or rather, slugs are averse to coffee. And I think it might have benefits to the plants themselves as well, and the soil, I'm unsure, but primarily It is something that protects your garden from the creepy crawlies. It's quite useful. My partner, she doesn't drink coffee. I'm the only coffee drinker in the house. And so in that way, I suppose at least we have mutual benefit of me drinking the coffee. I suppose the other benefit is that I'm awake and lively in the morning, which is helpful in our household, you know. I am sorry to say that I am that sort of person who really does need their morning coffee to feel alive in the morning, to be able to pull myself out of a sleepy rut. But I've always been quite a sluggish person in the morning, even when I was quite young. And so, honestly, I'm not sure how it is that I did manage to wake up so effectively when I was young without coffee. And now, having drank it for so many years, it is difficult to imagine. Sometimes, on a very rare occasion, and it is very rare these days, when I do get to sleep in until I feel that I've slept enough, I feel pretty good to wake up and start the day, and I can forgo a coffee for a good 2, maybe 3 hours before I sort of feel like, again, probably more out of ritual, feel like that I would like a cup of coffee. But generally, as you may well know, may well relate, life often gets in the way of us sleeping for as long as we like, for many various reasons. Primarily the biggest one being that we have these obligations, mostly work, or maybe children, or anything else, really, that is getting us up earlier than we might like to, I suppose. And so, I do find coffee quite helpful in the mornings. I think I have acquired a deep love of the taste over time as well, and I'm not sure when that transition happens, really. Because like I say, my partner doesn't drink coffee. I have several friends who don't enjoy it, and I can fully understand why, really, because it is earthy, and it is oftentimes bitter, really. And it doesn't sound like something that would be enjoyable to drink when described, one of the coffees that I bought recently from this place that I like to go, that I mentioned before. So obviously I came away with my French partridge, but I also decided to go for something a little different, and that's how I like to play it usually. I'll turn up, I'll get 500 grams of the French partridge because I know I like it, and then I'll get 250 grams of something else, something a little exciting, just to see if I can find something else that I might like. And I mostly sort of pick it at random at this point, because I think even if you discuss with the people there the kinds of things you like, and they give you a recommendation, it is still kind of just like, buying a lottery ticket I do feel you may as well pick at random, really. Just sort of go with your gut, what you like the sound of. And I recently bought as my sort of secondary experiment, my fancy, something referred to as Moroccan Melba. Moroccan Melba? And that is especially smoky. And I'm not entirely sure I enjoy it fully, really. I think it's, it tastes as if it was smoked intentionally with wood chips. It's incredible, the flavor, really. I don't think I've had a coffee like it. It's certainly unique, but I wouldn't say it was delicious. But when you taste coffee like that, you can really understand why it is that people might not enjoy coffee. And I think there was probably a time in my life where I didn't either. I may have tried it for the first time when I was quite young. Well, I say quite young, probably in my teens. And I think I remember, although I don't have an exact memory, not particularly enjoying it. I do remember not really enjoying both tea and coffee. And so, at what point it grew on me, I'm not sure. Although, having said that, I think I am starting to remember how it happened. And that is through the gateway of the mocha, or the mocha, as the Americans say, I believe. And that does make it a little bit more palatable. And when you have a mocha, which if you're unfamiliar is essentially just coffee with a bit of chocolate in it, chocolate powder. When you taste that, that's when you start to sort of see the overlaps between what's nice about chocolate, what's nice about coffee. And of course the sweetness helps a lot because that tapers off the bitterness. But then there's also, that shared earthiness, a richness that coffee and chocolate both share. And then after a while, you can have coffee with sugar, or maybe with syrup. And then after that, you can have it without. I remember I used to really enjoy having coffee with cream and sugar. It's an especially delicious experience. And I wish so much that we had the sorts of kind of creamer, I suppose they call it. Half and half, I think, is the name that they have in America. I've not been to America too many times, I think. As many times as I could count on one hand, for sure. I have some family over there, so periodically, over the years, I've been to visit. And I visited a couple of times by myself. But when I'm there, drinking coffee is my favorite thing to do. And I absolutely love the creamers and the half and half. I remember staying at a hotel one of the times that I was in America, and I went down to the restaurant near the lobby for breakfast. And the first time that I saw these sort of large, kind of like liter bottle dispensers with with pumps on top. The kind of pumps that we would only have for things like ketchup and mustard in the UK, but this was a pump full of creamer you could add to your coffee in the morning. And that first time I tried it was almost a transcendental experience. It's such an American experience. That's something one of the things I love the most about America. Possibly the only thing I really like the best is experiencing the food. Because, well, they don't go by halves, they make enjoyable food, most certainly. And creamer is just sort of an example of that, I guess. And I remember the next time that I went to America, I went to the supermarket or the store, a Walmart, I believe, and got myself some creamer for the fridge so I could have it at home. Because we weren't staying in a place where I was having sort of a buffet breakfast in the mornings at that time. And I love that so much. And I will still occasionally treat myself to a coffee with some cream and sugar. But that really is a treat, I think. These days I drink my coffee black. And I much prefer it that way most of the time. I don't think I could drink cream and sugar every morning. That would be too much. Now I like to have the full flavor of the coffee in water. Most definitely. And that's quite a recent change, really. I would say probably only in the last year have I been doing that. And it's funny how you transition to stronger coffee. In that way, I had milk in my coffee for much, much longer than I had sugar in my coffee. So it went, mocha, then sugar and coffee, and then pretty quickly onto just coffee with milk. And then quite a long time of coffee with milk. Probably about half the time most of the time I've been drinking coffee. And then I think it was just when we sort of ran out of milk at some point in the house. And rather than pop to the shops, it just seemed easier to have a black coffee, and it turned out that wasn't so bad. And now I quite like it. I'm glad as well. It's supposed to be healthier for you, I suppose. So I've heard. Not sure how true that is. I've been told coffee has antioxidants in it. And precisely what it is that antioxidants do, I'm unsure. Why they're good for you. Something to do with the blood, I suppose. Iron in the blood. Making sure the iron in your blood doesn't rust, oxidize. These are complete guesses even. What I've said there kind of feels a bit silly, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was something to do with oxidization, antioxidant, after all. Though I could be mistaken. I look forward to finding that out. Perhaps I'll talk about it if I do another conversation about something vaguely relevant. I guess I'll find out. One of my favorite anime cartoons is one called Tokyo Ghoul. I don't know if you've ever watched any anime. You may not have. It's quite a niche interest. people are often put off by anime because it feels a really different kind of television to be watching, I suppose. It is quite embedded in Japanese culture. And the format is a little bit spare, shall I say. It's lacking for someone with more of a modern Western taste in cinema and TV. One of my good friends once said that when they were first sort of trying to get into it, that it felt like watching a storyboard for a show, like an animatic for a show, rather than an actual show itself. Like the first draft of someone planning an animation, just purely because, of course, if you've seen any anime at all, it's so still most of the time. They don't spend much money on doing many movements very often. In that sense, it's very simple. But some anime can be very beautiful, very beautifully made, and a lot of effort can go into it. And what's most interesting is the stories that they tell, I find. I think there is incredible imagination in Japanese creatives, unlike anything you see elsewhere in the world, in my opinion. And like I say, one of my favorites is one called Tokyo Ghoul, which is a very strange show. Broadly about sort of these ghouls, these strange ghoulish creatures that sort of prey on human beings, that pretend to be human beings, that sort of lurk in plain sight around Tokyo, and about this young man who is inadvertently caught up with the ghouls and is meant to be a victim, but ends up having his life spared. But this means that he transforms into a ghoul himself and has to figure out a way of living life. And he gets picked up by some ghouls that live in Tokyo that are good guys. They have the bad guys who sort of go out and sort of carelessly hurt human beings, and then they have a certain selection of ghouls that still have some morality left, I suppose, and they don't want to go out there and drink blood. I mean, there's strong parallels between these ghouls and vampires, I suppose. I think it's easier for me to describe them as vampires, really, because it's very similar. They drink the blood of the humans. But the good ghouls that take in this young man, they run a coffee shop. And part of the plot is that the reason that they run a coffee shop is because they discovered that when they make coffee and they drink it, it sort of satiates their need for going out and grabbing a human. And so they use coffee as a means of keeping themselves at bay. And it offers them a little bit of peace, a little bit of serenity. And so this young man is taken under the wing of this good ghoul society and taught how to work in the shop and how to make coffee. And in this anime, in this story even, they make coffee in a way that I believe was, if not invented, then most likely popularized by the Japanese. And again, I know that there must be a specific name for it in Japanese, but I know it as pour-over coffee. And this is something you might have come up against as well, if you are particularly into coffee or you've been drinking coffee for a while. And it's made using sort of this particular kind of like pouring kettle that has a long curved spout. Kind of almost looks like a watering can in some respects. And then on top of your cup or on top of your serving jug, you would put this sort of round funnel-shaped glass or ceramic funnel, I guess. That's how I would describe it. And that was the word that I was looking for some time ago when I was describing the Italian stovetop device. The thing in the center it looked like a funnel. That's what it looked like. But you'd have this large sort of like a glass, usually funnel shaped kind of bowl that sits on top of your cup or your, like I say, your serving jug. Then inside of that you would put a filter paper that makes a funnel shape. You can buy these special sort of funnel shaped filters. And then on top of that you would put your coffee grounds. And then the idea is that you would spend some time pouring the hot water over the coffee. And it does take some time. It is a long process to make coffee in this way. My brother went to Japan and said he had some pour-over coffee. And it was 40 minutes after he'd ordered it that he eventually received it. And I've spoken about the importance of context in memory of the magnificence of food or anything you taste or experience in general. And so once again, I'll say that I couldn't say whether it was the very fact that he was in Japan, in a Japanese cafe, and that he had waited all that time for his coffee. But he claims it was the best coffee he'd ever had, and he's been chasing that taste and that flavor for some time since he's come home. He talks to me about pour-over coffee a lot, and especially in this anime Tokyo Ghoul, they do make it look so peaceful, like such a meditative practice. I think there's something special in that style of anime. Again, if you've seen any, whenever food or drink is featured, for some reason it looks so much more appetizing in an anime. But yes, it looks so peaceful in the way that they do it. And I think I would love to give it a go, though I'm not sure I have the time these days to make a pour-over coffee. Although perhaps it's something you can kind of do a little bit of and come back to, do a little bit, come back. I might like to try that. But either way, sort of any process of making coffee, with grounds, that is quite meditative. I think I did have an espresso machine at one time. And that was quite quick. It was good as well. But still, quite a process. You put your grounds in, you would get your espresso out, but you might have to froth the milk, or at that time I frothed the milk. Usually if you're having a drink of water from the tap, or juice from a carton or something like that. You don't have to work so hard for a drink. See what I mean? But the fact that you put that effort, that labor into it, and it is something you can offer your full concentration to while you're doing it. And in some way, that effort and that concentration is imbued into the drink itself. And then it comes out hot. And you have this warm mug. Like I say, you can take it as a quiet moment. And every sip is a rest, is a moment of contemplation. And you don't drink it quickly. You drink it slowly. And you let it wash over you. You let the taste linger in your mouth. You let the feeling of the coffee slowly imbue itself into you, as you gradually feel more relieved, more refreshed. That is the beauty and the peace of coffee for me.